Good morning on this March 8th of 2024, and we have news that there will be, well, a whole lot of out with the old, in with the new kind of things happening is what we're going to talk about today. And we have news that there will be another new document from modernist Rome coming out soon to cause endless debate, and they've promised it by the end of March. But first, I want to start on a positive note. So, we're going to talk today about Our Lady of Virtues, which is today's feast day. I've got a little thing here for you. I had to actually translate it from a foreign language site, so I wanted to make sure we had this as accurate as possible. So here's a little bit about today's feast day, Our Lady of Virtues. All her lovely life long, Mary lit candles of the 10 principal virtues which the Gospels attribute to her, namely purity, prudence, humility, faith, piety, obedience, poverty, patience, charity, compassion. Candles which Our Lady lit to illuminate the pathway the children of God must travel to the eternal rendezvous with Him. Mary lit a candle of purity on the day of her Immaculate Conception and kept it trimmed in a glow until the angel escorted her to paradise. When God sent the angel Gabriel to communicate to Mary the good news of the divine maternity, she knew this would mean ineffable joy and unutterable sorrow. She could have withdrawn her consent. Instead, she lit the candle of obedience and submission to God's will. Behold the handmaid of the Lord, be it done unto me according to thy word. We have here a model of ready acceptance on God's authority of what was naturally possible. Vowed to virginity, she did not doubt God's promise that she would become the mother of his son. She knew it to be possible with God. She believed the archangel Gabriel. She believed St. Joseph. She believed in and adored a God in swaddling clothes. Well could her cousin Elizabeth call her blessed, because she had believed. Hope filled Mary's heart on the first Holy Saturday, when the apostles and disciples were mortally afraid that the cold tomb would not give up its dead. Hope carried Mary high through the appointments and frustrations that invariably beset the children of God, journeying toward the promised heaven, and because she hoped in him, she had become our hope. Mary lit the candle of charity. At a time when might was right and tyranny clamped its iron grip upon the little people to instill fear in them, Mary fulfilled to perfection the new commandment of brotherly love. Her heart was literally overflowing with love of God, love for men, love for God's wonders, wrought in her most humble person. Charity prompted her to visit her aged cousin, although it meant a tiresome journey of 70 miles from Nazareth to Ein Karim. Charity led her to solicit a miracle from her son at the wedding feast of Cana. Charity urged Mary to accept the death of Jesus for the remission of the sins of mankind. Mary has always loved us and still loves us. The combined loves of all earthly mothers past, present, and to come. It's like a block of ice in the comparison with Mary's love for one single soul. Mary lit the candle of courage. It took rare fortitude to travel to Bethlehem, to rise at midnight and head toward Egypt in exile. What courage when the mob of our so-called elder brothers clamored for the death of her son. To take the taunts, the finger pointing, the malicious gossip during the years of Christ's public ministry, and pierced with sorrow, she nevertheless stood courageously at the foot of the cross. Mary's virtues are lovable, accessible. She is the mother of the light of the world. Who follows her does not walk in darkness, but in full effulgence of light that leads to sanctity. So today is the feast of Our Lady of Virtues. It's a good feast day, one that disappeared from the calendar, of course, when they, starting in the 1950s, decided to get rid of excessive Marian feast days, as they called them, whatever that means. All right, so out with the old, in with the new. That is the theme today. Picking up on that theme, in Germany, bad Catholic youth group believes St. Thomas More is bad. I'm going to be a pro tip to people here, very basic life tip. If a Catholic, if there a canonized saint can't be a bad thing. You can't use a canonized saint and take a look at him and say, "Oh, that guy was a bad guy." Okay, that you can't do that and call yourself a Catholic. But apparently, there's a Catholic student group out there who believes that St. Thomas More is bad, and this is from Gloria TV. The decadent diocesan youth of the Diocese of Munster is distancing itself from its patron saint, Thomas More, a towering humanist and martyr for the faith. And when they use the word humanist, they use it in an actual Catholic sense as opposed to a secular sense of humanism. The student group passed a ridiculous resolution against the saint by 42 votes to 1 with one abstention. The title of the resolution is, brace yourself for this high towering intellect, Thomas Morris, a not so nice dude. These are the people who are putting St. Thomas More on trial for being a bad guy. After a trip to London in 2022, the student group clowns studied the saint's life, and the Grand Inquisitors therein found points which, in our opinion, clash with the values of the student group. Maybe the values of the student group should be more aligned with those of the canonized saint. Just a thought. They complained that St. Thomas More persecuted supporters of the Reformation, who ended up, eliminating him, that the reason for his canonization was his opposition to the king's divorce, thus allegedly preventing, quote, another marriage. Again, this is why St. Thomas More is bad, apparently. The self-appointed inquisitors also accused the saint of having, quote, stood up for the old values of the Catholic Church. Right. Again, sometimes when I point out that essentially there seems to be two churches occupying the same space, that's where we are. Here's another bit of evidence for that. Okay. Therefore, these comedians will no longer emphasize St. Thomas More as their patron saint. Thomas More Prize will be renamed. A new name could be "Who Accepts This Prize is a Fool." This is a critique from Gloria TV's EN News. They also call for a nationwide debate on More's status as patron saint of their student group. It would be indeed a shame if such a wonderful saint were to be associated with such pathetic braggarts. Again, that is a group of Catholics in Germany deciding that St. Thomas More is a bad guy and not somebody to be venerated. Robert Richards reminds us they do the same thing to St. Louis, King of France. Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. They do the same to him. So pray for those students, please. Pray for them. And now let's go to our main story. So today we have this fantastic story. I'm not going to go over the whole thing, obviously, but you get this. Victor headline from, this came from LaCroix, but I had to run it through archive. Victor Manuel Fernandez, the other Argentinian who shakes the Vatican. Since his appointment as head of the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith, Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez has continued to attract criticism. But this theologian, as discreet as he is close to Pope Francis, who has blessed James Martin Pairings, assumes responsibility for provoking tensions. Oh, that's great. That sounds good. That's not what we're talking about here. Instead, we're going to go all the way down to some of the other things he's talking about here, which is why he's chosen. Because part of it was they want to relocate the Curia out of Rome. Okay. What does that mean? Remember, Francis talks about going out to the peripheries. He wants a church of the peripheries. He's defined it elsewhere as being a church dedicated to the Southern Hemisphere, a church where the future is in the Southern Hemisphere, because we are constantly told the church is growing in Africa, although experts will tell you that's actually not really true, that Presbyterians, Pentecostals, and evangelicals are actually siphoning people out of the Catholic Church in Africa. In South America, it's definitely not growing anymore. Evangelicalism, Presbyterianism, Pentecostalism are growing by leaps and bounds in South America, to the point where pretty soon people won't call it Catholic South America anymore. But it is growing in Asia still too. And he wants to really reach out to the Southern Hemisphere, but he does it through a frame of liberation theology. So you get this tension between North and South on economics, politics, all the rest of it. And this is how he means by relocating the Roman Curia outside of Rome. So, from the article. At the beginning of July, the appointment to the strategic post of this Argentine theologian, very close to the Pope for having been one of his theoreticians in his country, had the effect of something going off in the Roman Curia. His essential role in drafting major papal documents, including the most sensitive and contested, such as Amoris Laetitia, the exhortation on the family, was an open secret. But no one had imagined him becoming the powerful guardian of the dogmas of the Catholic Church. Within the Roman Curia, the liabilities are very heavy. Everyone in Rome remembers his statements to Corriere della Sera, one of the main Italian daily newspapers, where he described the Vatican administration as a non-essential structure, going so far as to plead for its relocation out of Rome. Everyone in Rome also knows that the Vatican opposed his, meaning Fernandez's, appointment as rector of the Argentine Pontifical University in 2009. And if he was finally appointed, it was because of the intervention with Benedict XVI of the Archbishop of Buenos Aires at the time, a certain Jorge Mario Bergoglio. 14 years later, it didn't take much for his promotion to appear as revenge by Francis against the Curia. So Benedict helped Fernandez get appointed to the Argentine Pontifical University in 2009. There had been a very real effort to block him. And they never tell you who tried to block him in this. And while I can't prove it, my money would be on Hector Agur, the now Archbishop Emeritus of La Plata, because when he retired, Fernandez became the Archbishop of La Plata to replace him. He was one of the most influential bishops in Argentina. Agur was. And his retirement was accepted, and he was sent packing out of his archdiocese in La Plata within hours of his submitting his resignation and when he hit the mandatory retirement age. Popes are free to ignore such submissions or take their time accepting them. His was accepted within hours. They typically take several days. It was as if Francis had marked the date on the calendar when he would accept the resignation of his old nemesis, who now frequently writes letters from retirement almost 10 years later that LifeSite News and others publish. But he chose him because of his qualities as a theologian, if you can believe that. Former Dean of the Faculty of Theology in Buenos Aires, President of the Argentine Theological Society, and of the Faith and Culture Commission of the Argentine Episcopate, Cardinal Fernandez was nevertheless chosen by the Pope for his qualities as a theologian. As an appointment that he refused the first time before he asked him again in June 2023. Francois was then in the hospital. This is this is from, again, La Croix, which are the French bishops' news outlet. So Francois was then in the hospital where he was recovering from an operation when he picked up the phone. The Pope's main argument, Vatican sources report, is very clear. If Fernandez must come to Rome, it is to help the Argentine Pope, whose pontificate is coming to an end, to make his magisterium more coherent, a way of consolidating its theological heritage. Thus, Fernandez gives in, not without having warned him, it will be war against me. And Francis responds, you will be able to cope with it. Is it to anticipate these criticisms that Francis will call, a few days later, Cardinal Gerhard Mueller, fierce critic and former prefect for the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith, in order to ask him to become friends with the Argentine theologian? All right, so he was chosen for his qualities as a theologian. Having skimmed through those books of his and his other writings, that's an interesting basis to choose him. And Fernandez warned that there would be an uproar caused by his appointment. None of which should be surprising to anybody that he warned him, because Fernandez knew he came with a lot of baggage, and you got a hint of that when they tried to make him the head of the Argentine Pontifical Academy, which Francis helped him with. It's worth noting Mueller was one of Fernandez's recent predecessors in the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, now dicastery. And the fact that that Francis called Mueller, well after Mueller had become one of his staunchest critics, to make friends with Fernandez is telling. I'd love to see what Mueller has to say about that. Now, Mueller, being a moderate, would probably give some very measured takes about him, would probably avoid taking any personal digs at Fernandez's theology or anything on a broad level. You'll notice his corrections of Fernandez are always about the argument at hand, and they never really drift into this is modernism, this is heresy, and the broader implications of Fernandez's appointment to that dicastery. Gregory McKelney says, how diabolical is it that bad news from the Vatican seems to come during Marian feast days? This Holy Week may become very interesting. We don't know when that document's coming. That website that I got that information from Our Lady of Virtues on, they have every Marian feast day listed, and there's almost a Marian feast day every single day of the week, it looks like, because many Marian feast days are local traditions, which you should bear in mind if you're thinking about doing a consecration to Our Lady. Whether you're doing the 33 Days to Morning Glory one, which I'm not a fan of, because the St. Louis de Montfort one is better, as our St. Maximilian Kolbe one is better. Most of those are rooted much more heavily in prayer than the 33 Days to Morning Glory one, which seemed a little light on prayer to me compared to some of the other ones. But you're supposed to do it, start 33 days before a Marian feast day. Well, there's a Marian feast day on the old calendar almost every single day. So you can go and find one. But here, we now have the news, of course, of what this document is. It's going to be a document on, as I've said before, a future text is coming on human dignity. I can't wait for the man who wrote that, that book on ecclesiastical kissing to tell us what human dignity is about. Wait till you get a load of this, because we get a hint. Cardinal Fernandez, a train that nothing will stop, predicts a Latin American source from the Curia, continued in mid-December the project started by the Pope by publishing Fiducia Supplicans, which authorizing the blessing of couples, quote, irregular, at the same time causing a deep crisis in the church. The Pope didn't really support him, laments one of his Roman friends. So what they mean is that Francis didn't come out enough to defend Fernandez. Francis did remain pretty quiet during the aftermath of that. Yeah, he said some things, But I guess Francis is getting some criticisms within his own circles for not supporting him enough. And that actually is an interesting thing, because most people think Fernandez has zero shot of becoming pope, even though being the prefect for the now dicastery for the doctrine of the faith gives you a very serious pedigree in terms of being able to sell yourself as pope, as a papal candidate at a conclave. But no serious person thinks Fernandez is a serious candidate. But I would almost suggest that he has got enough support among a certain faction that maybe a lot of these cardinals at the conclave who have been kept out of the loop, who have been too focused, who don't have really serious jobs in the Roman Curia, and thus spend their time in the peripheries, far from Rome, they could be manipulated into supporting a Fernandez. Could be. I'm not saying he's the next pope. Please don't take me to say that. But don't be surprised if, when the conclave comes, we start hearing whisperings that Fernandez is making a good showing, at least early, before either a moderate is elected instead, or somebody that would be a sleeper that nobody suspects at all, who seems weak, could be controlled by the modernists instead. But don't count Fernandez out, because it sounds like he's got a lot of actual support among the Bergoglian wing of the modernists. That conflict planned by Cardinal Fernandez is in any case not about to end. He is in fact preparing to publish a new document, this time devoted to human dignity. The text, developed by Roman theologians for 5 years, was revised from top to bottom upon its arrival. An express request from the Pope. Its objective to introduce central themes of the pontificate into the magisterial, the actual big T or big M magisterium of the church, such as people moving around a lot or care for our common home. While the first version was limited to subjects of bioethics, the document, almost ready, could cause a new shock. Its release is scheduled before the end of March. And that's an interesting hint to me, because the end of March, what is at the end of March? Well, the end of March this year is Easter. It's Good Friday. It's Holy Week. Could you imagine issuing a document like that on like the Wednesday of Holy Week? When we typically commemorate the introduction of the Eucharist to the apostles. Could you imagine? Could you imagine? I mean, it's so ridiculous. Could you imagine it being released on Good Friday? I mean, that'd be a day when hardly anybody's paying attention. Joe says, it's no longer necessary to be taken seriously to send the highest offices. Yeah, no, that's very true. But this isn't the only thing we've heard of with this. So there's actually some more details elsewhere. So from Gloria TV again, next shock ahead to go once domestic conflict in the church. They're citing that article I cited here for you. But let's give you some here. Let me give you the main points of this, because there's a little more detail here. Fernandez lives within the walls of the Vatican and rarely leaves them. He doesn't drop into offices to ask how things are going and is a loner, so much for synodality. Meaning that tells me he's actually very serious about his work. A lot of people want you to be collegial in an office place, but actually most of the work gets done by the people in a lot of professional environments who don't spend a lot of time socializing at work, because they're in their office doing their work. This tells me that Fernandez is actually very serious and dedicated to his work, which is a quality you want in your prefect for your dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. It's just it's unfortunate that this is that the work he's very serious about is scandalous and heretical. They say it's an open secret that Fernandez played a major role in drafting important papal documents, such as Amoris Laetitia, which he wrote from Argentina, but no one thought he would become the prefect. The promotion was Francis's revenge for the Vatican's timid opposition to Fernandez's appointment as rector of the Pontifical University of Argentina in 2009. Fernandez warned Francis before the appointment, "There will be a war with me," in which Francis replied he can handle it. Many critics believe that Fernandez has been widely discredited for his embarrassing books on, sins of the flesh. Discredited among people who weren't going to like him anyway, perhaps with some of the more moderate cardinals. I say perhaps because the thing about moderate cardinals is, including, I hate to say it, like Mueller, if you do enough digging, you'll find a lot of very questionable statements, even from Mueller. They've been expounded endlessly. Just go look in the archives of some of the more traditional print outlets back when Mueller was the head of the CDF. You'll find them taking him to task for some of his own writings and statements about Adam and Eve and other things in the past. Moderates are usually the hard ones to peg. I'm not sure that this is going to discredit him that much with some of them. With Mueller, yes, because Mueller himself has said that he that he has corrected Fernandez endlessly on this stuff. But Fernandez is preparing a new document on human dignity. The text was drafted. They don't tell. See, what they fail to tell you is who drafted it, because one of the articles I read in preparation for today, and I thought it was in this one, but it was not, so my bad. But it was drafted by Cardinal Ladaria. Now, so Ladaria was one of the predecessors of Fernandez, the immediate predecessor. And one of the documents that he objected to was, well, he objected to the very concept of the blessings as outlined in Fiducia Supplicans. He was not a supporter of it. He publicly said no. He was the one responsible for the 2021 CDF document, rejecting the very concept of blessings of the kind outlined in Fiducia Supplicans. In fact, it's that he said that, he issued that document. Francis got angry with him for it, and then he asked him for his resignation, and then was replaced by Cardinal Fernandez. So Fernandez is rewriting that document now, which had been focused on bioethics. What do you think bioethics is? If you watched the very Catholic president's address last night, you'll get some idea of what that document was going to address. Well, they're rewriting the whole thing. And they're going to include the church endorsing people moving around a lot, if you catch my meaning. It's definitely one of those terms that our hosts don't like you bringing up at all on this platform. And the so-called care for our common home. Laudato Si, Laudato Deum, all things green, and, all that stuff. Those topics are going to be in this document on human dignity. It's a document that's going to sell the church out. Again, if you have been following the antics of the Vatican since at least 2019, then you'll remember a document called Fratelli Tutti, which is a document on human fraternity. It's the only document I've ever seen from the church that uses the terms liberty, equality, and the terms from the French Revolution, right? The three terms. I can't remember the third one. Put it in the live chat. Okay. I'm tired. My coffee is just kicking in. But that it uses the slogans of the French Revolution in a positive way. It's the only one I have ever seen from that. Fraternity. There it is. Liberty, equality, fraternity. Thank you, David Wilson, and Mikey for covering my brain fog this morning a little bit. There have been plenty of documents issued by the Vatican correcting those stonecutter terminology and values before from the French Revolution, but this is the first one to use them positively. Fratelli Tutti was a strange document too, because I remember going over that in a live stream back in 2019. This is the same Pan-Amazon Synod. It's when that document was issued. The same thing, the same synod that was kicked off with the Pachamama debacle. Okay, 5 years ago now, 4.5 years ago now. And we went over and somebody I had on with me went over that document together, and it was a clear selling out of the church to the world. The church became focused on NGOs. The church became focused on people moving around a lot, if you catch the meaning, all of those things. So this is going to be a follow-up document to that, wrapped up with a bow under the guise of human dignity. Will this cause as much of a stir as Fiducia Supplicans? Probably not, because Fiducia Supplicans, with the James Martin stuff in there and the being Amoris Laetitia 2.0 with the irregular couple stuff, lends itself to being much higher profile. But this is going to be a very important document because it's designed to make Francis's magisterium, the magisterium of Francis, as the modernists call it, coherent. It's going to be probably one of the more important documents of this alleged papacy. Good morning, Winter Night. Just says it sounds like a lot like Fruit Tutti. Yeah, a friend of mine called it Tutti Frutti, like, the old 1950s rock song. Eric John asks, are there any good bishops left? How much do you want to bet they will all say nothing about this? Schneider, I think, is the best of them. Is the actual best of the bishops. Mueller's good on a lot. Burke is good. Most of the better bishops are cardinals who are basically retired or close to retirement, so they don't have as much to lose. And this is why lately I've been trying to bring you writings from Bishop Lutzeritz, and whenever Schneider speaks, those, because they have much more to lose, because they are auxiliary bishops. They're supposed to be the future of the episcopacy, but they're never going to get promoted because of their words. David Wilson says the French Revolution and Cope and Tierra. That's invoking the permanent destruction of the Alta Vendita. Catherine Hickey says, human dignity, former indulged prayers asked for grace to protect and defend the faith without human respect. We have to put aside everything aside for our Lord and the truth. Yes, that's what it used to be. Mikey, I don't cover unapproved apparitions or unapproved mystics or anything. I think it's dangerous to do so I don't do it because there's so much fake messaging going on out there that I wait for the church to approve. And unfortunately, these days, that means anything going on now, I'll have to cover years from now when we get better leadership, hopefully, without having to go through a material chastisement to get through it. But yeah, so here we go. Human dignity, folks. Are you ready for a little bit of human dignity? I, for one, can't wait. Along the lines of said human dignity is this story here. I don't know if you've been aware, but we've had at least twice now cardinals coming out and saying, "Oh, I didn't write the Demos 2 thing." You know, I saw Tobin saying it recently. I saw Cardinal Gregory say it. But the National Catholic Reporter has warns us about political polarization inside the church. The thing about political polarization inside the church, and presumably even in the secular world, is you end up getting one side that does things so over the top that it ends up being really divisive. Some people, through their blind loyalty to their side, will defend those things, even if they're over the top and pushing too far. This happens regardless of your position on the political spectrum. Both sides are guilty of this. And in the church, we see the same thing. So when Cardinal Gregory is lecturing all of us on political polarization, we need to be wary. He says, whenever I experience the church in true dialogue and open conversation, that's synodality. Whenever the church gathers and everyone feels respected and can open their hearts, that's synodality. In other words, when everybody feels good and they're left in an environment where they can feel good, that's synodality, said Gregory, who participated in the Synod of Bishops in Rome. The cardinal noted that the synod included representatives from the Catholic Church around the world, men and women, young and old, clergy, religious, and lay people. We got to know each other and to speak to each other about things important to us as Catholics, he said, adding that dialogue allowed synod participants to exchange ideas and sometimes disagree with each other. An especially moving part of that gathering for him was an ecumenical prayer service before the synod, which representatives of different Christian faiths and young people from different cultures prayed together. The dialogue was a salt and light gathering for Catholics under 40 years old to help them explore links between faith, Catholic social thought, and their lives and work. Yada, yada, yada. Noting how the nation's capital is now an epicenter of division, Washington's Archbishop said, we have to learn how to focus on the issue, not the person. But this is such a wonderful empty platitude, isn't it? On the issue, not the person. He added that in a time when personal attacks seem to be more prevalent than the sharing of different political opinions, social media has given differences in energy and a power I don't think they've ever had before. Gregory said that the spirit of division, amplified by social media, also has infected our church. Noting how in past ages Catholic saints sometimes disagreed, he said, Aquinas and Bonaventure didn't always see eye to eye, and they still may be arguing in the heavenly kingdom. I don't know. End quote. I doubt they're arguing in the heavenly kingdom, since it's defeated that those who get to heaven are spending their time in prayer before the beatific vision. Imagine you being able to stare at the majesty of God that our minds can't even fathom today, and then trying to argue with your, earthly debate counterpoint. I mean, I can't even imagine. But again, there's your hint about what will be in that human dignity document. Dialogue, 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 synodality, synodality, synodality. This listening, making people feel good, making people feel welcome stuff. Mostly empty platitudes. I don't mean anything. Most of what he said there means nothing. We should listen to each other so we don't hurt each other's feelings, so we can overcome political division. Well done, Cardinal Gregory. Well done. If anybody's got any final thoughts in the chat, please let me bring them forward now. This is a good time to do it. What do you expect out of this human dignity document? Do you expect as much of a hot mess as I do? Do you think this is going to be a bad deal for the church, as I do, because of the person who's writing it? Exactly, it's empty babble. It is. It's empty rhetoric, but Fernandez's document won't be. Again, never underestimate Cardinal Fernandez. He is probably one of the sharpest, if not the sharpest person among the Bergoglians in the Roman hierarchy at this time. Hearing the word dialogue makes me cringe. Same with synodality for me at this point. There apparently was just a small earthquake in Sydney, says Benedicta. That's that is unusual. I live in an area with small earthquakes, so if you're in an area that's not really built for it, even small ones can be a bad thing. All right, folks, thanks very much for tuning in today. And pray for everybody we spoke about today, for Cardinal Fernandez, Cardinal Gregory, those students in Germany who decide that St. Thomas More was, quote, a bad dude, as they described him. Make sure to say a Hail Mary for them today, okay? It's hard to actually have an animosity towards people that you pray for. So please do that. It is something we should do in our journeys to trying to become saints. So always pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.